stepped, like this, like that, her back against the leather, so, her elbow resting on the door, waiting. She would have been soiled long since, had there been anything to soil her, except herself. But this was her own self-outpouring. With an effort, he forced himself to start the car and back into the street. This was nothing, he must remember. She had done this before, and he had put her behind him, as he would have crossed a bad account from his books. He drove slowly downtown, and, affecting abstraction, traversed the deserted streets of the business section, peopled here and there where a movie was giving out its crowd, or where consumptive or pugilistic youth lounged in front of pool halls. The clink of glasses and the slap of hands on the bars issued from saloons, cloisters of glazed glass and dirty yellow light. She was watching him closely, and the silence was embarrassing. Yet in this crisis, he could find no casual word with which to profane the hour. At a convenient turning, he began to zigzag back toward the university club. "Have you missed me?" she asked suddenly. Everybody missed you. He wondered if she knew of Irene Shearer. She had been back only a day. Her absence had been almost contemporaneous with his engagement. "What a remark," Judy laughed sadly, without sadness. She looked at him searchingly. He became absorbed in the dashboard. "You're handsomer than you used to be," she said thoughtfully. "Dexter, you have the most rememberable eyes." He could have laughed at this, but he did not laugh. It was the sort of thing that was said to sophomores, yet it stabbed at him. "I'm awfully tired of everything, darling." She called everyone darling, endowing the endearment with careless, individual camaraderie. "I wish you'd marry me." The directness of this confused him. He should have told her now that he was going to marry another girl, but he could not tell her. He could as easily have sworn that he had never loved her. "I think we'd get along," she continued, on the same note, "unless probably you've forgotten me and fallen in love with another girl." Her confidence was obviously enormous. She had said, in effect, that she found such a thing impossible to believe, that if it were true, he had merely committed a childish indiscretion, and probably to show off. She would forgive him because it was not a matter of any moment, but rather something to be brushed aside lightly. "Of course, you could never love anybody but me," she continued. "I like the way you love me." "Oh, Dexter, have you forgotten last year?" "No, I haven't forgotten." "Neither have I." Was she sincerely moved, or was she carried along by the wave of her own acting? "I wish we could be like that again," she said. And he forced himself to answer, "I don't think we can." "I suppose not. I hear you're giving Irene Shearer a violent rush." There was not the faintest emphasis on the name, yet Dexter was suddenly ashamed. "Oh, take me home," cried Judy suddenly. "I don't want to go back to that idiotic dance with those children." Then, as he turned up the street that led to the residence district, Judy began to cry quietly to herself. He had never seen her cry before. The dark street lightened, the dwellings of the rich loomed up around them. He stopped his coupe in front of the great white bulk of the Mortimer Joneses' house, somnolent, gorgeous, drenched with the splendor of the damp moonlight. Its solidity startled him. The strong walls, the steel of the girders, the breadth and beam and pomp of it were there only to bring out the contrast with the young beauty beside him. It was sturdy to accentuate her slightness, as if to show what a breeze could be generated by a butterfly's wing. He sat perfectly quiet, his nerves in wild clamor, afraid that if he moved, he would find her irresistibly in his arms. 2 tears had rolled down her wet face and trembled on her upper lip. I'm more beautiful than anybody else, she said brokenly. Why can't I be happy? Her moist eyes tore at his stability. Her mouth turned slowly downward with an exquisite sadness. I'd like to marry you if you'll have me, Dexter. I suppose you think I'm not worth having, but I'll be so beautiful for you, Dexter. A million phrases of anger, pride, passion, hatred, tenderness fought on his lips. Then a perfect wave of emotion washed over him, carrying off with it a sediment of wisdom, of convention, of doubt, of honor. This was his girl who was speaking, his own, his beautiful, his pride. Won't you come in? He heard her draw in her breath sharply, waiting. All right, his voice was trembling. I'll come in. It was strange that neither when it was over, nor a long time afterward did he regret that night. Looking at it from the perspective of 10 years, the fact that Judy's flair for him endured just 1 month seemed of little importance. Nor did it matter that by his yielding he subjected himself to a deeper agony in the end, and gave serious hurt to Irene Shearer and to Irene's parents who had befriended him. There was nothing sufficiently pictorial about Irene's grief to stamp itself on his mind. Dexter was at bottom hard-minded. The attitude of the city on his action was of no importance to him, not because he was going to leave the city, but because any outside attitude on the situation seemed superficial. He was completely indifferent to popular opinion, nor, when he had seen that it was no use, that he did not possess in himself the power to move fundamentally or to hold Judy Jones, did he bear any malice toward her. He loved her, and he would love her until the day he was too old for loving, but he could not have her. So he tasted the deep pain that is reserved only for the strong, just as he had tasted for a little while the deep happiness. Even the ultimate falsity of the grounds upon which Judy terminated the engagement, that she did not want to take him away from Irene, Judy, who had wanted nothing else, did not revolt him. He was beyond any revulsion or any amusement. He went east in February with the intention of selling out his laundries and settling in New York. But the war came to America in March and changed his plans. He returned to the West, handed over the management of the business to his partner, and went into the first officers' training camp in late April. He was one of those young thousands who greeted the war with a certain amount of relief, welcoming the liberation from webs of tangled emotion. This story is not his biography, remember, although things creep into it which have nothing to do with those dreams he had when he was young. We are almost done with them, and with him now. There is only one more incident to be related here, and it happened 7 years farther on. It took place in New York, where he had done well, so well that there were no barriers too high for him. He was 32 years old, and except for one flying trip immediately after the war, he had not been west in 7 years. A man named Devlin from Detroit came into his office to see him in a business way, and then and there this incident occurred and closed out, so to speak, this particular side of his life. "So you're from the Middle West," said the man Devlin with careless curiosity. "That's funny. I thought men like you were probably born and raised on Wall Street. You know, wife of one of my best friends in Detroit came from your city. I was an usher at the wedding." Dexter waited with no apprehension of what was coming. "Judy Sims," said Devlin with no particular interest. "Judy Jones, she was once." "Yes, I knew her." A dull impatience spread over him. He had heard, of course, that she was married. Perhaps deliberately he had heard no more. "Awfully nice girl," brooded Devlin meaningfully. "I'm sort of sorry for her." "Why?" Something in Dexter was alert, receptive at once. Oh, Lud Sims has gone to pieces in a way. I don't mean he ill-uses her, but he drinks and runs around. Doesn't she run around? No, stays at home with her kids. Oh. She's a little too old for him, said Devlin. Too old, cried Dexter. Why, man, she's only 27. He was possessed with a wild notion of rushing out into the streets and taking a train to Detroit. He rose to his feet spasmodically. I guess you're busy, Devlin apologized quickly. I didn't realize. No, I'm not busy, said Dexter, steadying his voice. I'm not busy at all. Not busy at all. Did you say she was 27? No, I said she was 27. Yes, you did, agreed Devlin dryly. Go on then, go on. What do you mean? About Judy Jones. Devlin looked at him helplessly. Well, I told you all there is to it. He treats her like the devil. Oh, they're not going to get divorced or anything. When he's particularly outrageous, she forgives him. In fact, I'm inclined to think she loves him. She was a pretty girl when she first came to Detroit. A pretty girl? The phrase struck Dexter as ludicrous. Isn't she a pretty girl anymore? Oh, she's all right. Look here, said Dexter, sitting down suddenly. I don't understand. You say she was a pretty girl, and now you say she's all right. I don't understand what you mean. Judy Jones wasn't a pretty girl at all. She was a great beauty. Why, I knew her. She was... Devlin laughed pleasantly. I'm not trying to start a row, he said. I think Judy's a nice girl, and I like her. I can't understand how a man like Lud Sims could fall madly in love with her, but he did. Then he added, most of the women like her. Dexter looked closely at Devlin, thinking wildly that there must be a reason for this. Some insensitivity in the man, or some private malice. Lots of women fade just like that, Devlin snapped his fingers. You must have seen it happen. Perhaps I've forgotten how pretty she was at her wedding. I've seen her so much since then, you see. She has nice eyes. A sort of dullness settled down upon Dexter. For the first time in his life, he felt like getting very drunk. He knew that he was laughing loudly at something Devlin had said, but he did not know what it was or why it was funny. When in a few minutes Devlin went, he lay down on his lounge and looked out the window at the New York skyline, into which the sun was sinking in dull, lovely shades of pink and gold. He had thought that having nothing else to lose, he was invulnerable at last. But he knew that he had just lost something more, as surely as if he had married Judy Jones and seen her fade away before his eyes. The dream was gone. Something had been taken from him. In a sort of panic, he pushed the palms of his hands into his eyes and tried to bring up a picture of the waters lapping on Sherry Island and the moonlit veranda, and gingham on the golf links, and the dry sun, and the gold color of her neck's soft down, and her mouth damp to his kisses, and her eyes plaintive with melancholy, and her freshness like new fine linen in the morning. Why, these things were no longer in the world. They had existed, and they existed no longer. For the first time in years, the tears were streaming down his face. But they were for himself now. He did not care about mouth and eyes and moving hands. He wanted to care, and he could not care. For he had gone away, and he could never go back any more. The gates were closed, the sun was gone down, and there was no beauty but the gray beauty of steel that withstands all time. Even the grief he could have borne was left behind in the country of illusion, of youth, of the richness of life, where his winter dreams had flourished. Long ago, he said, long ago, there was something in me, but now that thing is gone. Now that thing is gone. That thing is gone. I cannot cry. I cannot care. That thing will come back no more.
Okay, so let's pause for a moment, do a quick annotation. It is a long story, no question, to read, although I've had juniors who point out it's a strangely short, long story. In other words, once you kind of get caught up in the story, you have a tendency to recognize that, wow, this guy's a good storyteller. But let's ask this question now really quickly at level 1. What is this story about? Can you summarize it in a line or two? It's a longer story than normal stories, no question. But what is it fundamentally about? Well, of course we could say it's a story about a guy and a girl, no question. Dexter and Judy Jones. Dexter's quest for her, that's one way to read the story. The other way to see the story, of course, is the way in which Judy Jones is incapable of really ever committing to him. Now, there are different readings of course, these two characters. So let's play the game really quickly there. What do you want to say about Dexter? If you could reduce him, for example, down to 3 adjectives, what would they be for you? Right? 3 ways to describe him. Maybe you might say about him he's handsome. Maybe you might say about him he's ambitious. Maybe you might say about him that he's, confident, we might say. Right? But we might have some other things to say about him. Like, he's vulnerable. He longs for the thing he can't have. And of course, the thing he cannot have that he dreams most of having. Question, is it Judy or is it Judy's love? That is to say, does he want to possess her or does he want to possess the idea of her? The capacity that he can somehow control her. Is he attracted to Judy Jones because he can't control her? And of course, that has always begged the question in 303 when we read this story. Why is it the case at Worland High School that it seems guys want to go for the girl they know they cannot get? Or, if they even were to get the girl, then they quickly would realize they couldn't hold on to her. That is to say, she's going to bolt sooner or later anyway. Why are guys attracted to that? Let's talk now about Judy Jones. Describe Judy for 3 adjectives. What is it for her? And of course, one of the 3 has to be stunningly beautiful. She is a physical specimen. When she walks into a room, every guy in the room looks at her and says, supermodel, wow. That we know about Judy Jones. But what are some other things we want to say about her? How do you qualify her? Some will argue she's nothing more than a flirt, a player. She loves jacking around with guys' emotions. That is to say, she plays games with guys' hearts. Right? It does remind us at 3a of that exchange between Hamlet and Ophelia, between Hamlet, the guy, and Ophelia, his girl, when he makes the observation that beautiful women, by definition, are liars. They cannot tell the truth because guys will believe anything that comes out of their mouth. Certainly Judy Jones is one of those kinds of girls, right? Anything she says a guy wants to believe. Is Judy Jones simply a woman who has no tolerance for stupidity? That's why she can't stay with a single guy. Does she not want to be controlled? And why is it in the end, do you think, that she ends up settling for one guy? We obviously don't know in our story here. We just know that she ends up marrying and having children, and she begins to lose her physical beauty. Let's jump to 2a. What do you want to qualify as some major messages or themes here? Clearly something about the American dream is a part of this story. The notion that you achieve through hard work and a good education to get wealth, to get power. Of course, the irony in the story is Dexter gets all of those things, but he never can get the thing he wants the most. What is that? Is it peace? Is it some sense of completion? If only he could land Judy Jones, all the other things would be of value. Does Dexter want love? Is that in the end what he's so hungry for? Of course, the story also will play interesting games about the ways in which the very thing you want the most, your dream, ultimately is shattered because it cannot work out. Is this story then a love story? Do you read it as a love story, or do you read it rather as a comedy of a kind? It's kind of a tragicomedy. In other words, by the end you can't help but laugh at this idiot guy who his whole life professionally has been wanting something that he probably never could have had. Finally, what does this story say about the idea of the American dream? Does it paint the idea of the American dream as, does Fitzgerald paint it as something that's unrealistic, or rather something that you have to keep at it even when you are unable to achieve your initial dreams? Of course, in level 2B, we already pointed out the genius of Fitzgerald. I've had juniors that say, I don't quite understand the way it is that I got caught up in this story, but I found myself wanting to know what would happen next. One of the answers to how that happens is Fitzgerald has a brilliant way of creating conflict. So let's identify that at 2B. We have two kinds of conflict in stories, right? You learned this when you were freshmen. We have external conflict, right? So for example, we can have an idea of a character versus another character, right? We can have an idea of a character versus a force of nature. We can have an idea of a character versus a group or society or an idea. And then we have what is called internal conflict, a character who is conflicted with himself or herself. Let's ask really quickly at level 2B, where do you place the primary conflict of this story? Is it an external conflict, Dexter versus Judy? Or rather, do you see this as a conflict that's internal, namely within Dexter's mind himself, as he's trying to come to terms with the fact that he never can get Judy, even though that's what he seriously longs for? Or does he really long for it? Why is it that he so easily can walk away? Is it self-preservation in the end for him? Of course, at level 3, you can, I'm sure, write down any number of movies that play this same game of the guy